So I am here with Michael Fiddle from Sports Ethos and the Advantage podcast. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on today, Scott.
Thanks for coming on. I have a quick. I want to get into a lot of stuff. I want to hear about your background and how you got into sports betting. But first, I just want to clear up something. I listened to a lot of your podcast on the Advantage, and I was a little unclear about how you feel about parlays. How do you feel about parlays?
I appreciate you bringing me on and then cursing at me within the first 30 seconds live on air. I always say parlay is a sin in the sports gambling world. It is an absolute curse word. We were just talking off air that if you can bet on sports, you can say the word fuck or shit, or you could occasionally curse. Like, I was apologizing. It might come out of me. I'm sorry. But parlay is like really the one word that I do not want to hear. I will not be recommending any parlays. If you enjoy shooting yourself in the foot, I mean, if you enjoy going a little Plaxico Burress on yourself, then you can play parlays. But from a like, if you give me 2 seconds to explain the math behind it, a two-leg parlay has 4 possible outcome combinations, but they only give you a 2.6x on the multiplier if you're just taking straight minus 110 odds. A 10-leg parlay has 1,024 possible outcome combinations, but 645x on the multiplier. So really, these multipliers are nothing but traps and lost values, and they look super pretty. They look intriguing, but they are nothing but that, like traps and ways to get you.
Well, I do want to get into more parlays a little bit later when we talk about betting strategy. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the 6 different types of bettors that you went over in one of your podcasts. Yeah. And we could probably get a little bit more into parlays later. One thing I do want to do is I want to give you a hypothetical scenario a little later on about parlays. And I want you to tell me if that is an actual parlay that you would do. I know you're like 100% like there are no parlays, but maybe there is like one kind of like a boost that might work. And so I know
you mentioned earlier that I work for Sports Ethos. I give out picks pretty much daily. I handicap NFL and NBA. I've been doing it publicly in the content creating space for a little over a year now. Been doing it personally for 11 seasons. Just in the picks that I've given out, I think I've given out like 1,200 picks so far in the last year plus, and I think 4 of them have been parlays. So there are certain instances in which you do want to fiddle around, no pun intended, and throw in a parlay, but they're few and far between. So if you happen to hit one of those with your hypothetical, we'll get into it.
What is it? What was the one? Do you remember which one it was?
So I actually just put one in a few days ago, and it was parlaying Joel Embiid MVP when he was, I actually caught it live when he was mid first quarter. He had scored 18 in the first quarter. He was putting up 52 against the Celtics recently. He was a minus 200 in the MVP going into the game. And it was like clearly a storyline cinching, playing against the Celtics, securing, the 3 seed, locking in that they're going to play the Nets in the first round. Jokic had been sitting the last few games. Giannis had lost a few recently. Giannis had just lost by 41 to this Celtics team. And here's Joel putting up 52 against them in a win. I was like, okay, here's the narrative ceiling deal of Joel Embiid. And I happened to notice that on FanDuel, you could parlay the awards. And Paolo Banchero was sitting there at Rookie of the Year, albeit minus 4,500. So I always calculate implied probabilities. If you give me 1 second, I could do it right now. The implied probability of Paolo Banchero at a minus 4,500 is 97.8% chance to hit. And I personally think it was already a wrap. I think Paolo could have sat out the next few games. I think who's possibly second, Jalen Williams of the Thunder. He could have had, a Kobe-esque 81-point game. I still didn't think that was putting him over the top. So I thought that race was completely settled. So I was simply throwing in the parlay leg because I thought one storyline was completely over. I didn't even consider it like a gambling leg, but I added it in simply to reduce the payout that I was getting on Joel Embiid.
And I think the important thing is that you did the math on it. That's all. If you're going to do a parlay, you have to do the math, and it has to make sense mathematically. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I'll take you one further. If you're going to put in a bet, if you're going to just submit the submit the button and make it a pending wager, you better be doing anything more than just the eye test and just the, this is what I think is going to happen. This is what I assume this line says. And this team is +5.5. That doesn't seem right. I'm going to hit it. Boom. You better be doing more than just looking at the lines and thinking that looks nice.
So let's get into that. Who does the eye test? Are there bettors out there that just do the eye tests?
No, this is ring one of the 6 levels of sports bettors. Certainly the public. Those are the, I call them the hooligans. I know everyone wants to call them the public bettors. I just think they're total buffoons. So we should call them what they are. We should put a little damper on their parade. Public just sounds like, I go to the concerts with the public. We all have a good time. Sports betting world, I want nothing to do with those. I understand that public people have to be in the market for me to capitalize off them because the way the house operates. And don't get yourself twisted. Like, the house is one of the types of gamblers in the sports market. There's plenty of times where the book is willing to say, let's gamble. And those are, maybe we'll get into those in a bit. But yeah, public is definitely the people who are doing the eye test, the people who are taking juiced alternate lines. That's like the biggest. Remember those, Scott? You remember those commercials where you like smack your forehead and you're like, you should have had a V8 and like drink your vegetables. And it's just like, oh no. That's what I think when everyone's taking like Giannis Antetokounmpo over 20 points. It's because it's juiced to -2,000 and his real over-under is 36.5 for the game. And let me parlay it with the Bucks money line because if the Bucks win, Giannis is definitely going to score. Okay, yeah, that's ridiculous. Like, it's such lost value to start slamming these SGPs together, to be eye testing these things, to be coming up with storylines in your head. The playing team psychologist is a classic public play. Oh, so-and-so's mad that he got snubbed from the All-Star game, so they're going to come out and go over on their points total. Don't come at me with that. I want to hear about matchups. I want to hear about the defender on the other side. I want to hear about the way this defense situates themselves to play against guards. I want to hear about pace. I want to hear about how they close out on 3-pointers. I want to hear about where the total is going. Is the total going up or is the total going down? If I'm targeting a player prop, if I'm targeting someone's over, I'd hope that the game total is also going from 232 to 234.5. So there are things like that. If I'm just looking at lines, you're doing yourself a disservice.
So you don't want to be a hooligan. And we'll get into a little bit later. We'll get into like what you actually do want to do or what type of bettor you might want to be. I know there's like a couple different types, but how did you get into sports betting? What brought you into this world?
The origin story is definitely a good one, a funny one. So my mom was dating a guy and his name was Stuart. Well, shout out to Stuart. He wanted to become a better friend with me. Like, he wanted to be the mother's boyfriend who's like trying to get to know the kid pretty well. And I was like a freshman in college at this point. So it's like 13, 14 years ago. You guys can all date me with my age. And so he set up an online betting account. And that was when you had to go to Western Union, set up a deposit to some offshore account, send in your ID, your credit card, wire money to some offshore place. It wasn't as simple as signing up for FanDuel or signing up for DraftKings. So he really put in the effort to set up a sports betting account. And then, of course, whenever I would go to his house, whenever we would hang out together, whenever we would catch a football game, he was a Ravens season ticket holder. So we'd often go to the Ravens games, but we would, throw $50 on a game, $100 here or there. And he put, $500 in a sports betting account. And he's like, let's have fun with it. When we're together, we'll put money on the games that we're watching. So this is when Oklahoma City had Durant and Harden and we're taking them against Dirk and the Mavs on a Thursday TNT game. And, I was fascinated by it. I was immediately I don't know why me personally took this approach, but I don't know. I'm always someone who's taken to puzzles and to figuring things out and to always solving things. I could teach myself the Rubik's Cube when I was a kid. So I was always putting pieces together. My immediate instinct when I learned about sports betting was not to go with my own sports takes. It was to start understanding this place as a market. So I actually went back to college. I said I was a freshman in college at the time. And I called my mom and I said, do you think Stuart would give me the login and password to that sports betting account? I want to start like watching the games and doing it with my friends and having fun here and throwing 50 bucks on a game here and there. I definitely did not understand unit distribution and bankroll management, and throwing $100 when there's $500 in your account is hooligan type level stuff. Maybe we'll get into some bankroll management in a bit too, depending on how much time we got. But I ended up going to the library when I was a freshman in college. I started tracking professional handicappers. I had Google Excel sheets tracking everything that they were doing. I was watching their YouTube videos. I was studying odds makers and how they even post lines. I was going through so much things. I was tailing professionals. And when I say tailing professionals, Scott, I don't mean they got the line at 230 and I took it at 231.5. Like, I would only take the bet if I was getting the exact same line at the exact same odds, because if I did that over time, if they have a 56% hit rate, no matter what bets that I choose, I should also pick off relatively a 56% hit rate. So I started understanding the math behind this, that when you're playing lines, you need above a 52.4% threshold to be profitable. That's like the key number if you're popping minus 110 lines, which is the standard odds. And I built that bankroll to $18,000 very quickly. So no parlays, straight bets only. Definitely got lucky. Definitely didn't have my unit distribution at a low exposure level like I like to now. But I was able to like really build that up. And I knew it wasn't a fluke. And this was around the time that the DFS world was starting up. So I got like really got my hands dirty in doing NBA and NFL daily fantasy stuff. And this was like before everyone and their mom had an algorithm or could just subscribe to an algorithm and then pop out a formula lineup. So I was so ahead of the curve in the DFS space. So it was really great. I absolutely crushed. And I realized like my brain really situates well with this market. And I started investing a lot of my time there. I started making more money there than I was at, the normal day job.
What happened to that 18,000? Did you get to keep that, or did your mom's boyfriend take it?
So my mom and Stuart eventually broke up. RIP to that relationship. I think it's all for the best now. I'm not going to get into it. I don't even think I even know the details of all of it. I'm just a son in the corner. But I actually never spoke to Stuart again after they broke up. So I never even. I would imagine that money is still sitting in that account, and he probably has no idea either. But like, I wasn't going to make a fuss over the money when my mom was like, they were actually engaged and broke it off, not to get too deep into it. So like there was some level of like, this is a serious breakup. So I'm not going to, talk about the gambling money. And again, offshore account, his ID, his credit card, his bank information. Like I wasn't going to get into it. So I let it go. I opened up my own sports betting account with $300 and I've been building it back up ever since and doing incredibly well too.
Yeah, and it kind of shows you the passion that you have for it that you saw right away, because you weren't doing it for the money, to collect the money. You were doing it it's like a game to you, and you just wanted to like solve that puzzle.
Yep,
which makes sense. So how did you get? I'm gonna jump ahead again, and I know by listening to your podcast that you consider yourself a line movement bettor. At the core. I'm sure you do a little bit of everything. Like you said, it's like an Olympic ring. How did you get from 10 years ago when you had that account with your mom's boyfriend to a line movement bettor? How did that evolve through the years? Was there anything like in particular that happened, or was it just a slow roll?
I would say it's probably a little bit of a slow roll and a ramp up, and just starting to understand and just constantly observing. It took a lot longer back then than I would think it would take me now, or just an average Joe Schmo now, because there's so much more information and outlets into the gambling market, into what reverse line movement is, into FanDuel reporting the betting splits and understanding this. So like there's so much more to that you can actually understand now. When I was started off, and when I describe that like Olympic ring, and I describe the 6 different types of handicappers, and I suggest anyone listening to this, go check that out, because it's really important to understand yourself as a handicapper. Where do you thrive? Where do you succeed? And then when you're following people on Twitter or listening to other people's podcasts, you want to know how they view themselves and where they succeed, and how, what kind, if you're leaning on other people for their advice, you want to understand their style of handicapping as well. So I described the public, which we talked about, hooligans, doing dumb shit like playing parlays and doing the eye test. The second ring up from that is trends betting, which is something I actually have come to despise. And they're the people who say like, Andrew Nembhard has played, you know, the Pacers are tanking, so Nembhard has played 30 minutes in his last 12 games, and if he keeps getting this type of playing time, he should score over on his points prop. And I'm like, okay, I hear you, but that's certainly all priced into the line. Like, if you don't think that the book priced in Andrew Nembhard's last 12 games into what his prop line is for this game, I mean, you're crazy. If you think you can do it better than the books, you're even crazier than the first crazy. So then I was like, okay, so I'm definitely not studying box scores to then get the next edge. So then what is the edge that you can get? And there's two things that I really like doing. There's systems that you can play and line movement capping. So I'll go into line movement capping, which is when a line is posted, it moves all over the place, right? This is a market. It essentially imitates a supply and demand market. The basic premise of a sports book is that they want to get equal exposure on both sides of the line. They want to have the losers of the bet pay the winners, and they take a 10% winning tax. That's why they 110 to win 100. It's essentially a 5% tax from everyone betting because they don't know who's going to be on the winning side, who's going to be on the losing side. So the house takes a 5% cut of all bets, and their basic model is to have equal money on both sides of a line, and therefore it is a market, and therefore the lines are going to move. So my whole point as a line movement capper is to understand that let's use the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat as examples, Scott, because they are going to face off in the first round. So I assume when people listen to this podcast, they're going to be capping some Celtics Heat in the near future. So let's assume that the Celtics are the home court game one, and the line opens at Celtics -6.5, right? That's the case. I will be hopping on that immediately, right away, if that's the line that drops out, because I have a strong suspicion, and there's a lot of other gambling indicators that I track. There's a lot of other line movement trends that you can become aware of, that you could latch onto, that can show and be, I say indicators because they start to tell a story, right? You're using the betting splits to come in to indicate what's going to happen in the market. So,
can you get into what the indicators are?
Yes. Okay. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Sorry.
So I'll use these indicators and I'll say, I see this line at -6.5 at -110. But if this line gets to -8.5 by tip off, right? So that way the live line is 8.5, but I'm holding a 6.5 ticket. I have 2 points of CLV, which stands for closing line value. So I'm 2 points ahead of the market. So then if I dig a little deeper into that and I say, okay, a normal -110 bet has a 52.4% implied probability. And implied probability is not the chance that the bet has to hit, because obviously it's a 50-50 when you're just taking the standard line that's live. But implied probability is the needed hit rate for you to be break even or slightly profitable, right? So on -110 lines, you need to hit 52.4 or more to be profitable, 52.38 if we're really getting in the weeds. And then, so what I do is say, okay, I want to grab this -6.5, because if at tip it's -8.5, you could then look for the alternate spread. So the alternate spread, and go find the line that I have. So I'm going to find the 6.5 as an alternate spread in the market, and I'll see it's at like -140, right? Because now if you're betting and you're coming into the market when the live line is 8.5 and you want to make it 2 points better for yourself, you are going to have to increase the juice that you are paying. Correct? You follow me, Scott?
I'm following.
All right. I hope I'm not making this too confusing.
Not at all. Not at all. It might be a little bit into the weeds for our listeners, but I don't care. Okay. You got me on the edge of my seat.
So a -140 line has an implied probability of 58.3%. So if that line at -6.5 moves to -8.5, and then I go find the -6.5 again, and instead of being at -110, it's actually at -140. So now I am walking into tip-off. I'm going into the game. Before the game even starts, I am holding a ticket that has an implied probability of 52.4%. But if you look at the live lines for that current game before it even starts, The actual implied probability of my ticket is 58.3%, but I only need a hit rate of 52.4 to be profitable. So that difference is my plus expected value. So what I'm constantly doing, and the way that I'm evaluating myself as a bettor, is saying, I don't care what happens in the game. I don't care if I lose that game. One game sample size, move on. Don't miss me with that. I don't care what happens. You're not someone who tells me that I'm on, if I'm clearly crushing CLV, but I still get my bet wrong. If someone tells me I was on the wrong side, I say, no, I was on the right side, because I'm walking into that game with a plus expected value ticket. And if you're doing this for 11 seasons like I have never had a losing season, because over time, in the long run, month by month, if you have 7% expected value on all of your bets, or you just have more bets with plus CLV than minus CLV with plus EV tickets, then you are going to be profitable in the long run. So my whole concept of betting is to find these indicators, which we could certainly get into, understand the direction that the market is moving, get in as the wave is going, and then before tip off, be ahead of the market. And as long as I've done that, I've done my job.
That makes sense. So can I give you an example of one that I saw just recently?
Shoot,
I saw one of your tweets maybe a couple days ago. It was an Orlando Magic game. You tweeted out the night before that the over under was 223.
Yep.
And the line came off the board, and you said when it comes back on, it's probably going to be 221.5, and I'm going to jump on it.
Yep.
And that line continued to go down through the next 24 hours, all the way down to 213. And then it came back up to 214 before tip off, maybe 214.5.
Where did it land? Where did it land, Scott?
I think it was 214.5. It depends on what the book was, but what made you say that? What made you send that tweet out? How did you know that it was going to come back to 221.5 and then jump and then continue to go down?
I was line shopping. So
you were line shopping. So what does that mean?
So I had 6 different sports books open. I had all the odds up. Or you can go to a website like OddsShark or Action Network or Don Best. You could find these resources that post every single line that's currently available. So I could go by state, and I could see I'm in California, so I'm in a illegal betting state, but I do my bets through New Jersey. So I'll go to the New Jersey site. I will see where BetMGM has it in Jersey, where WynnBET has it in Jersey, where Caesars, where FanDuel, where DraftKings, where PointsBet, where all of these sites have it. So I saw FanDuel 223, DraftKings 223, Caesars 223, PointsBet 221.5. Now, I know from doing this, Sharps loves PointsBet. They have a high limit. So if you're seeing a movement at PointsBet because they have a high opening limit, that's probably sharp action hammering a line with big money. And if a line is moving 2.5, 1.5 points without ticking down, without going half a point, half a point, half a point, trying to even, if it's just jumping 1.5 points immediately, the rest of the market is sure to catch up. These lines, we use the term moving on air. The FanDuel line will move without taking in the money because they know PointsBet took in the money. DraftKings will then move even lower than FanDuel because they're moving lower and PointsBet's moving lower. So now DraftKings wants to get ahead of it and get to 220. And then Caesars wants to get to 219. And then you have a cascade of line movement and it happening. And that's where you want to say, I want to get ahead of the wave before it moves too much. So that line, I think it moved all the way down to 213.5. And then the game ended at 214. So if you are a follower of mine on Twitter, I actually know some people that, follow a lot of my picks. And I actually wasn't able to get that bet in myself because I passed out before that tweet. I woke up the next morning. I saw it at 219. But one of my followers had reached out to me and say, hey, I saw it pop back up and I grabbed it. And now it's at 214. And they're like, hey, I'm grabbing the over at 213.5. And they opened up a middle for themselves. And they ended up middling it and hitting the 214 over their 213.5 and their under of the 221.5. So that one was a beautiful one.
That's crazy.
I'm glad you picked that example.
Yeah, that was it was an extreme example, but it kind of like captures what you do, everything that you do.
Yeah, but honestly, Scott, not too extreme this year because the amount of scoring that's been happening in the NBA has been causing totals to move wildly. Like the movement this year in totals has been 6 points, like every game. And then you get all these rest DNPs, then these late scratches, and these totals drop like wildfire. And so what I'm trying to figure out right now, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, is at what point do we then, is it smart to open a middle, right? So if I'm holding, let's keep using this example. If I'm holding that under 221.5 ticket, or even if I jumped in on the opening line and I got the 223 before the books took it off, right? Because they saw PointsBet took a huge sum, moved it 2 points. They took it off to say, okay, wait, let's evaluate what's happening. Maybe I got it before they took it off because I could see the movement when they could see the movement. We're all on their website. So it's not like PointsBet's calling up FanDuel and says, hey, we just got a big bet on the under here, so we're moving it. No, they're in competition with one another. They don't care. So I could have gotten the opening line. But let's say I got the 221.5, and then I saw it steaming down 219, 218, 214 at a certain point, 213.5. Do I let my positive CLV ticket ride? Because when you have that kind of CLV, when you have like 8 points of CLV, you're probably looking at your live odds being closer to like minus 200, which will have like a 66% implied probability. Now you have a plus 14% EV from your 52.4 that you need. So I'm sorry if I'm getting too crazy with the math.
No, you're good.
Okay. At what point do you then say it's actually beneficial to open up a middle? Because anytime you then bet the other side, you're inherently reducing your expected value, right? Anytime you hedge and bet the other side, or you want to open a middle or lock in profit, there's a part of you that's reducing your value. But the math of middling says it's a 5% implied probability, because if you have a minus 110 line on both sides and you middle it, you're guaranteed to win one, lose one. So, but you could win both. So the max you're going to lose is 1/10 of a unit. Assume you bet 1.1 to win one on both sides. The max you're going to lose is 1/10 of a unit, and the max you're going to win is 2 units. So you have a 20x on your wager to potential winning, which is a 5% implied probability. So if you could tell me, Scott, that an NBA game has a 5% chance of landing between that 213, 214, 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, then yeah, then it's worth it to open up a middle. So I'm actually, that's
what's the math on that? Is it, if it was if you had a 213 to 223 gap, that's 10 points. Maybe that's the extreme you could have got.
I mean, it's definitely worth 5%,
but you got to do the math, right?
It's definitely above 5%, right? But the question is, will that value exceed the value that you're foregoing by just letting your already positive CLV ticket ride?
Right. Is that just, so if it was plus 14 EV and do you take off 5 off of that because you're giving off 5 points by taking the other side? Is it just 14 minus 5? So it's 9 EV. I don't know what I haven't done the math.
I don't know. I don't think it's that straightforward. I would have to do more. I think you then have to consider the implied probability of the other line that you're taking. And I actually think better way to do this is probably with spreads than with totals, because an NBA game can land anywhere from 180 to 250, and we're not going to be too surprised, right? That's the same thing with NFL. Like the totals in the games, much more all over the place than a point spread. So I could tell you right now, Scott, a 1-point game in the NBA is the 11th most common outcome with a 4.1% chance of happening.
You know a lot about the. Go ahead.
So like a 7 is the most common outcome. A 5 is the most common spread that pushes. So like I know what is a quote unquote key number in the NBA. Those don't exist for totals. So if I got a line that moved from minus 3.5 and then it moved to minus 8.5, maybe because the Bucks are on the road and then decided to rest Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. So Giannis is playing, but whatever. So it moved to minus 8.5 and the Bucks are now catching plus 8. They're in Denver or whatever. And I had Denver minus 3.5. I know that the 4 most common outcomes in NBA games are 7, 5, 6, 8 in that order. So if I could get a 3.5 and then I could get an 8.5, I know that there's like a 20% chance of that happening. And then we have to also add in the caveat that in addition to these numbers that I'm giving you, like a game at 1 has a 4.1% chance of happening, a game at 1 has a 4.1% chance of happening, regardless if the spread is -15 or -9 or -7.5. What if the spread is -1? Then it has a bigger chance of landing. What if the spread moved from a pick'em to a -3? Does that have a higher percentage of landing at 1 than a spread that moved from -13 to 15? Yes, and I understand the numbers behind that as well. So some of my off-season project is really going to be diving into the math of middling and coming up with some sort of system to understand how to play the amount of line movement better from a math perspective. This year, I've just been letting my amazing CLV tickets ride and not opening too many middles, and it's been working fantastically. I'm up over like 40 units in the NBA season alone, and I'm someone who bets like half a unit or 3/4 of a unit, so I'm not giving out 5-unit lock of the day play on Twitter like a complete buffoon. So being over 40 units has been a hell of a ride.
It sounds like, it sounds like you're onto something with the spreads, because you can do the math a little bit easier. So it's to start at the spreads rather than doing over-unders where the math is a little crazy. All the numbers with the NBA, and it sounds like with the NFL too. Is that why you only do those two sports?
I only do those because that's what I watch.
Okay. So you watch the games too?
Yeah. Less than you would think, to be honest. I would assume people who listen to my podcast think I'm like ball hawking and watching every NBA night in line. Like, I certainly don't. I watch the marquee games. I love NBA playoffs. I love some of the NFL primetime games. I'm not going to be spending 8 hours at my TV on a Sunday at 1 o'clock. That's just not who I am as a person. I'll go for a hike and whatever. But yeah, I those are the only sports that I watch. So like, I definitely don't. I used to work in sports. I've worked for the Brooklyn Nets. I've worked for the Yankees. I've worked for the Islanders. I did not bet in sports while I was collecting a check from a professional sports team. I'll throw that out there.
What did you do?
I was one of the guys who helped all the charity work. So when I was with the Nets, it was actually an awesome job. So like, if the players were going to read to the kids at a children's hospital, whether they're going to serve food to the homeless at a Thanksgiving soup kitchen or something like that, I would actually plan the events, grab the players from practice, take them to the event, schedule the NBA Cares media to come, do the whole thing, get the players in like a little high five line or picture op, or, it was really fun. So I had
that sounds like a great job. Sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, it was a dream job that paid booty cheeks, I'd say.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, did you give that up just to bet on sports?
No, I gave that up because I then went and worked for Mike Bloomberg in New York, the former mayor. I worked for his company, Bloomberg, doing a similar thing, helping with the charity stuff. And they had a much bigger budget. And when they offered me a salary, I took it back to the Yankees who were trying to keep me. And I said, this is what Bloomberg gave me. And they said, Mike, congratulations. We can't give you that for at least 5 years here. So you take that and you run with it. So that's what I did. But yeah, working in sports was a lot of fun, but it was long hours and it was very low pay. So it's a great job when you're out of college and you want to, run and hustle. But like when Kim Kardashian was getting married to Chris Humphries, like me and Hump were friends. He would send me like happy Thanksgiving, happy Christmas, happy birthday texts. And like, I'm still in his Rolodex of his business phone that I get his, yearly Merry Christmas text.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you make more money betting on sports now anyway. So,
yep.
So you also are affiliated with Sports Ethos. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is Sports Ethos? I went on there a little bit and I actually signed up because I wanted to see what it was all about. It looks like it's kind of like blog based, like article based.
Yep.
Is that does that capture it?
Yeah, so it's a very fantasy heavy audience, very basketball and fantasy basketball focused audience, which is great. I love those people, love the community, love the mindset that they bring to NBA betting. Just having a fantasy analytic focus helps when they're not just being public hooligans when I give out advice. But yeah, Sports Ethos is the company that I work for. They publish all my podcasts that I do. I give out all my picks through them. And I think what's really special about Sports Ethos in comparison to some of the other things that you might find on Twitter or just some of these other like betting sites is there's actually a guy that works for Sports Ethos named Blake. I'll shout out Blake Lawatch right now. He's the head of the wagering division for Sports Ethos. And what his role is he literally tracks all of us. So there's a few other handicappers in the Sports Ethos wagering group. There's people who cover all the sports. There's people who focus more on props. There's more people who do PGA and DFS golf and tennis and UFC and college sports and a lot of the stuff I don't do. I only focus NBA and NFL. But Blake literally tracks all of us. So I'll get a text message from Blake every week like, Mike, update your tracker. I need to blah, blah, blah. So when everyone else on Twitter is pulling out their own stats and deleting their old tweets that actually lost and burying their stuff in the weeds and then reporting their stats and pinning the one tweet that they swept the board and hit all their 5-unit locks of the day, which is complete horseshit. Also, lock of the day. That's another complete curse word.
That's a curse word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put that with parlay and burn it on fire. So Blake tracks all of us. So when he tweets out all the stats. So you know that when you join Sports Ethos as a subscriber, you're definitely getting people who are good at what they do, who have been having tracked success for a long time and not just, again, people touting themselves as being able to do the eye test and then saying, you should put your money where my eye test is. Like, that's certainly not happening. What I subscribe and tell people, it's like, you should put money where our calculators are, where our, implied probabilities are changing, where we're reading the market. So yeah, it's been a very fun little over a year with me at Sports Ethos, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I want to continue to check it out. I looked on it a little bit and I liked what I saw. I saw that you guys do a lot of different stuff and you are fantasy heavy, like you said, and I'm into fantasy basketball. We're coming down to the last 2 days and I am in a 4-team race with 200-point spread and it's all going into tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we're going to find out who wins the championship for our fantasy basketball. But speaking of basketball, you mentioned that you love the NBA playoffs.
Love it.
What do you like about it? What do you look for when you're picking a champion heading into the playoffs?
What do I look for when I'm looking for picking a champion?
Or do you already have somebody lined up? I have a personal question actually. Let me rephrase the question. Did you pick the Pelicans at the beginning of the season to win the championship?
I had a ticket on them at 80-1 because of the value.
You had 80-1? Oh my God. I got them at 55-1. That's way better value.
Yeah. I mean, we burned that on fire, but yeah.
Well,
why do you ask about the Pels?
Because I just had a feeling I was listening to you talk on your podcast and I had a feeling that you had a ticket on that one. They're
a dangerous team. You've never met a bigger Dyson Daniels fan than myself right here. So when he's on the scene in a few years, you heard it here first that he's an absolute gangster on the court. Zion's the most unstoppable player in the NBA. So if he was healthy, they were going to be incredibly dangerous and underrated. And they had all the tools that you need to, when you are going to look for a NBA champion, you need half-court offense, you need defense, you need rim protection, you need shooting, and you need elite shot creation and scoring. So this year, I think it's, it's actually like it's tough for me to answer this question because I actually think that two things, Scott. One, when people ask me my sports opinion, I'm so aware of what's happening in the odds because I am a line movement capper. So I know who's steaming up in the futures market. I know that recently the Phoenix Suns, after Kevin Durant even came back, they were, now they're 8-0 with Kevin Durant. They are the clear favorite in the West. So if you're going to ask me who do you think is going to win, my own personal opinions have been so intertwined with just what's happening in the gambling market because I subscribe to it. I put my own money there. I put my own mouth there with my podcast. So if someone's going to ask me, Mike, what do you think? I'm only going to answer Suns because I know that's what's happening with the people who are actually a lot smarter than me. So I think it's going to be a Suns Celtics finals. I think that would be the make for the best and most interesting NBA playoffs. I think the NBA playoffs have a lot less parity than everyone wants to talk about. I think everyone wants to talk about anyone can win the West. This is a wide open year. To me, that's total bullshit. I've heard that story for 20 years now, almost every year when we watch the league, except for those LeBron Curry years when it was Durant with the Warriors and LeBron in the East, and it was just, we know who's going to make the finals. Like, even in the futures market, it was the Warriors were minus 175 those years to reach the finals. Like, it was crazy how much they were as a favorite. So I don't think there's parity in the NBA. So I think that's incredibly important to remember for the NBA playoffs, is like, hey, pick off first round favorites, like back first round favorites to cover the spread. Is it formulated system approach? Take the 1 or the 2 seed, as long as they're a -4 or a -20, between a -4 and a -25 in the first round. Take them.
So I'm gonna throw a little. I'm gonna take a left turn here. You touched on it a little bit just now, because one of my big questions that I had question marks in my head is, you mentioned that you have like sometimes 50% of your bankroll is in the futures market.
Yep.
Is that so? But being a line movement better and then, or capper, and then looking at like being a line movement capper and then the futures market, you really go into like steam, and you really look at steam and like where the big guys are going. How do you use that in the futures market? How do you go in? Does that make sense? I know I'm not making any sense right now.
No. Totally understand it. You want to correlate all of these angles together. You even want to correlate steam in a gambling market with daily fantasy stuff. So like, I entered a daily fantasy masters tournament right now. I know in the steam futures department, this is a really bad example right now, but Brooks Koepka went from 25 to 1 down to 40 to 1 the day before the tournament. That was a horrible sign. That was a sign that if you got money on Brooks, get out of it. Like, if you got Brooks in your DFS lineup, get out of it. Of course, he's winning the tournament right now, so like, shame on me. But that's one of those things where I'll say, small sample size theater. I don't care what happens in one-off. I don't care if Brooks ends up winning this tournament. It would have been the smart thing to get off Brooks. We need to understand that these people are so much smarter than us. Scott, how come the Eagles were the biggest steam of the offseason last year? How come before the week 1 even kicked off, the Eagles had surpassed the Cowboys in the divisional race? Because
everybody was on it, or not everybody, but
how come in the futures market, right before the NBA draft, Paolo Banchero became the odds-on favorite when Jabari Smith Jr. was leading the way for weeks? Like, why is this steam changing in the futures market? And it should really raise an eyebrow. So like, Banchero ended up being number 1. Like, last season, if we had talked right now, we'd be saying, why are the Celtics so low in the futures market? We're saying that about the Suns right now. Why are the Suns, they haven't played together long enough, blah, blah, blah. Everyone, who's their 5th guy? I don't care. They have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul. Like, they will be fine. As long as they're healthy, they're going to be waltzing in. I see you got the Charles Barkley behind you. You might be a happy man in a few months.
I was loving your prediction on that one.
I mean, hey, it's, again, is it my prediction or is it me understanding what's happening in the odds? So I just have blended my own sports takes with that.
So that answers my question. I didn't think about how the futures market it's also a market, and you can find the indicators in the futures markets too.
Although, Scott, I do want to say right now, if you're trying to go into futures, now is the worst time to then attack a NBA futures market. If you think that you can say, oh my God, the playoffs aren't set yet, but I think it's going to be the Lakers versus the Grizzlies. So let me, play it in this angle, because that's whatever you think and whatever you expect to be the outcome is already priced in. The exact percentage chance that the Lakers have to face the Grizzlies is factored into the odds that it's currently listed at. And then the exact % chance of where that matchup would be, everything is already calculated. So right now is a terrible time to get invested into the futures market, because the playoffs are set. So the only way to gain value right now by grabbing a team in a futures market, as opposed to just playing them from a round by round or a game by game perspective, is to then say, this team is going to crazy overperform expectations. So if you think, let's say, Memphis is going to come out as world beaters and then go from, whoa, like they were favorites in round 1 to, and probably underdogs in round 2 to, oh no, they're going to be the favorites in round 2. So if you can get into a switch like that and one team that crazy overperforms, but just by going further and going an expected distance is not going to get you value. So if you grabbed a Celtics to reach the finals ticket now, and the Celtics do reach the finals, and your bet ticket does win, like, good for you. I hope it gains some CLV between now and game 1 of the playoffs. But in reality, you'd be better off, even if they do make the finals, playing that round by round or game by game, because it is already baked in. The chance for the Celtics to miss the playoffs, even how low as that is from November, was priced into their odds. So you were getting that extra boost that, hey, this team might not even make the playoffs. Now we've gotten to the point where they are in the playoffs. We know who their matchup is. We know they are going to draw a really good first-round matchup for them. We know that they are going to have home court advantage, and their second-round matchup is going to be against the 76ers versus Brooklyn Nets winner, and they match up incredibly well on both of those teams and will have home court advantage. So, like, those things are all priced into the futures market. If you are going to look at futures markets right now, look to the NFL. Like, where is Lamar Jackson going to end up? What's going to happen with the Tennessee Titans? Are they going to be crazy buyers in the market, or they're going to be sellers? That's one team that might be shopping Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill and playing Malik Willis as a rookie QB and willingly going 2-15. They might try and bring in, they were like linked to Aaron Rodgers. They might try and bring in a different veteran quarterback. They might try and load up. They might try and bring in a bunch of people. And if that's the case, you know, their division sucks. Texans, Jaguars, Colts. That would be a very interesting team. So you want to try and latch onto some of these things far out in the future.
So the best time to do a futures bet is far out in the future, off season. That's the best time.
Yeah, but then of course it's pending and it's waiting in your account for a lot longer. So like, you know, NFL draft futures are good right now. I just think that if you like you generally want to have a higher ROI in a futures market than you do straight betting, because if you're tying up that wager or that amount in your account for a longer period of time and you can't recirculate and matriculate that into more bets, then you want to bring in a higher return. So for that reason, you do have to have a higher hit rate, you do want to target some longer odds and those longer props. I don't like taking favorites in futures markets because one injury drastically changes things. And I'd rather get to the playoffs or get to that point in the season where I know, hey, this team's relatively healthy, and then take it game by game. So I look long shots. I look futures. I'm constantly checking the futures market, Scott. Like I'm currently waiting for more NBA draft props to come out. I'm currently waiting for more NFL draft props to come out. Like, I really, really, really want Will Anderson top 5. I really, really, really want Jalen Carter top 10. I will pay nearly whatever for those lines because I think they're locks. Like, if you gave me a minus 10,000 line on Jalen Carter to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, I'm taking it.
And it sounds like bankroll management is also an important thing when you're doing futures markets too.
Bankroll management, unit exposure is important whenever. Like, I know I threw water on the 5-unit lock. Like, I call my max exposure a 3-unit bet. I call 1 unit is equivalent to 1.2% of my bankroll. I'll do this really quick for you, Scott. 1 unit is 1.2% of my bankroll. Okay. Which gives me, if I was going to lose money, 1.2 times 83 is 100 units, right? So I could lose up to 83 units before I go broke. But if I win 5 units, so if I go net plus 5 units, not just do I win 5 units, if I net plus 5 units. So if I lose 3, I got to win 8. So if I net plus 5 units, I've increased my bankroll by 6%, right? Because 5 times 1.2 is 6%. So what I'm constantly doing is playing this game with myself, not to sound weird, but I'm saying, will I go plus 5 units before I go minus 83 units? So I constantly have a 1.2% of my account is my unit. I'm going to try and increase my bankroll by 6% before I lose all my money. And once I get to that plus 6%, I hit the buzzer, I recalculate what my 1.2% is, and I start the game over. Once I'm winning, you want to scale up. You want your bets to get bigger as you're winning. Once I start losing, I don't freak out about it because I'm not concerned with losing. I know in long term, 95% of my bets have plus ELV, plus EV, plus CLV tickets. So I know it's going to come. I know I don't have to overreact. I know that with this low exposure, I have 83 units of wiggle room to lose. And Scott, if there's ever a day where I lose 83 units before I win 5 units, you've gotten yourself the answer. Stop sports gambling, right? Find a new hobby. So I have a lot of wiggle room. So what I'm constantly trying to do is say, can I get to +5 units before I get to -83? Reset the bankroll, scale up as I'm winning, and that's bankroll management. And then unit exposure is just, I won't put more than 3 units on a line. I won't just go into a 76ers -2.5 and put 5.5 units to win 5. Like, that is overexposing yourself. And even if you are doing this the right way, if you have one bad day, even if you have a ton of CLV, you might not win the bet. But if you have 5 units on 4 different lines and you have plus CLV on all of them, but you end up just losing them, and you lose 20% of your bankroll over 4 bets, like, that is just so unsustainable. Even with knowing that you're playing the numbers, there is a degree of variance that will kill you eventually. So that's why you need, like, you can go to a blackjack table and play 100 hands. There will be a time, if you play 1,000,000 hands, there'll be a time where you lose 30 in a row. So that's why you need to you know, I say, like, imagine yourself as a boxer. You keep your gloves up and we're jabbing. We're not throwing haymakers. Like, those are the parlays. We're just throwing jabs and keeping ourselves protected.
Michael, thank you for going over all that stuff. I have tons of other questions, so maybe you can come on again later, but I've taken up a lot of your time.
Before I get out of here, we need to do the parlay example, and then I'll go on my way.
That I wanted to give you. Okay, so this is the example. So so it's going to be in the player prop market. So if you do a lot of player props, and let's say that your unit size, I'm going to say a dollar amount, not the percentage, but let's say that your unit size is about $500 for each bet that you're doing. And with player props, you're capped out. You can't get a certain amount of money on each bet. So you're capped out at $250, and you can only bet $250 on that player prop. Okay. But you have 2 player props that historically in the last 10 years, you've won 62% of the time on this type of player prop. And there's no other way that you can find this bet on the market other than a parlay. Like, let's say, like, Prize Picks. I'm not a fan of Prize Picks. I think that they're a little tricky, but in a Prize Pick parlay for player props, it comes out to being +200. That's how much you win if you have 2 of them together. If you put 2 of them together, and +200, as we know, is 33.3%. Right. But if you win those 2 player props historically 62% of the time, if you do the math on that, you'll win that parlay 38% of the time. Yep. So if there's a 5% gap right there between 38% and 33%, is that something that you would go ahead and do that parlay?
Yes, but I would. 62% is very unsustainable for me.
Okay, yeah, this is a hypothetical. It's hypothetical. Yeah.
Most
people aren't getting 62%.
The best of the best, like even the premier cappers, the guys who are in charge of betting syndicates, the guys who are popping limits, betting hundreds of thousands of dollars in betting groups and having angel investors and betting their money for them. Guys like Warren Sharp, right? Like, he's the guru of NFL betting. Guys like Haralabob Vulgaris for the NBA. They're at 57% on a good season. They're at 56 consistently. Their goal is 55% to, bring home the needed money that they're going to, cover their year in profit, whatever. So 62%. Yeah. I mean, listen, if I had a 62%, you'd have to knock down my door and find the crystal ball that I'm hiding in my apartment that sees the future. So if you're hitting 62% of it, are those -110 lines? They can't be, right? Because then if the multiplier wouldn't be 2 to 1.
Usually with player props, it's -115 it starts at, and then it goes all the way up to 140, 145. But you're right. With obviously, if it's -145 and you're parlaying them, that's going to make a difference. Right. But on Prize Picks, there is no lines.
Let me ask you something on Prize Picks. I'm not too familiar with it. On Prize Picks, do the odds change, or is there just posted that like say Jalen Brunson's point total comes out and it's 15.5, and then Julius Randle and RJ Barrett are announced as out? Does Brunson stay at 15.5, or is it going to change, or like what? Like, is there line movement in this world? Is there?
There's no line movement. But what would probably happen if 2 players are out, they'd probably just take it off the board.
Right.
But there's no line movement. The line,
Okay.
so if it's a minus 145 or if it's a minus 110, they just post a number and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to do more deep digging into prize picks. I honestly have just generally avoided the props market altogether. So I'm sorry I can't give you the best answer on this, but the reason why I'm not a big props player is for that reason, right? Because I am a line movement tracker. We don't really have ways to track. And if you want to start $1 billion company, here's your idea. You can do it. Take the idea and run with it. Create a website that tracks player props. I want to know where Brunson's point total opened on FanDuel and on DraftKings. And I want to know where it sits now. I want to understand what steam has been happening in the props market. And for me, I haven't been able to find that information unless I'm literally catching the lines when they're posted or literally just taking a screenshot of them and then coming back in a few hours and comparing the 2 screenshots. Or like having a friend tell me this is what I saw, or seeing it on Twitter and saying, oh, I like this prop. And then I go to the market and I see the way that it's changed a little bit, right? So I have so much inherent less information, these indicators that I talk about, these betting splits, we'll get into them next time, that I don't really attack the props market as much. So it's hard for me to talk about prize picks or things like that because that's just not where I invest my energy.
Well, I have the homework for the rest of my life. I'm going to create a player's prop market.
Seriously.
That's what I'm going to get on.
It's absolutely brilliant. I have a lot more of brilliant ideas, designs for candles, beach chairs. We can get into that on another pod.
All right, we definitely will. Where can we find you? Where can we find you, Michael?
You can follow me on Twitter at mfiddle14. That's where I release all my podcast links. All of my best bets and posted are there. You could join the Sports Ethos Wager Pass Discord channel. We do have a 75% off coupon going right now. Promo code absurd for 75% off the first month. You could listen to my podcast, The Advantage. And just like you give Scott a 5 stars, you can give me a 5 stars as well, if that's how you feel. And if you don't think this episode's a 5 stars, just wait to the next one in which you do think it is a 5 stars and then drop it then.
But I think this one's a 5 stars, especially for our standards.
Oh yeah. We certainly crushed it.
And your podcast is a 5 stars. I love it. Michael, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, Scott. Anytime.